Well, hello. It's really good to see you today. We've been having the most incredible fall here in Minnesota. Normally in the beginning of November, you would not be working in the garden. So I wanted to see, do you want to do some body doubling today? We can work to tackle projects that we need to get done together. And then we can also discuss this idea of the stress cycle and burnout and how they go hand in hand. But there might be something actually really simple that we can do to complete the stress cycle so we're not so stressed out all of the time. So it's really interesting. So we can visit while we work today. So I'm here in the garden today. We had gotten most of it cleaned out, earlier in the fall, but there is this strawberry bed that went crazy. If you know strawberries, they can very quickly take over. And so they had taken over this aisle, and then on the other side, they're still there. And because it's been so nice out, it's 70 degrees out today, but then it's gonna start to cool off again. I was like, why don't I get a little more work done in here? And so basically what I wanna do is put down some new fabric and mulch here. And then this other aisle, I wanna get all those strawberry plants pulled out. And then I can show you the ones that I've transplanted already. So I get those pulled out, and then this is our asparagus bed. So we'll just leave that like that over the winter, and then come spring we'll clear it out, and then we'll see the new asparagus emerging. So it doesn't look super great over the winter, but it helps to protect it, so we're just gonna leave that there. Okay, had to take off the long sleeve shirt. Let me show you what I've already done out here, and then we can talk about this idea of completing the stress cycle. I think it's fascinating and really helpful. So, like I said, the strawberries had taken over this aisle too, and so I have been transplanting them over to this bed right here. And so strawberries are so easy to transplant. So we were just pulling them out a little bit and getting a little bit of roots with it, and then putting them in here, and I've watered them a couple times, but mostly neglected them, and they look fine. As fine as for the beginning of November in Minnesota. And then I also did put some aged chicken manure around it, but I want to get some mulch leaves around these too, as well as that other bed. So that's what I've done so far. The ones in that other aisle, I think I'm just going to pull those out and discard them. I don't think I'm going to transplant them anywhere. In a perfect world, I would, because we love having tons of strawberries, but for now I don't have a prepared place for them to go, so it is what it is. So I recently had a friend say, have you heard of this book, Burnout and the Stress Cycle? Because it makes a lot of sense to me. I'd really like to know what you think about it too. And so I was very intrigued. I like learning more about stress, and more importantly, de-stressing, right? And even there's the title, Burnout, and I'm like, well, I think we can all relate to that, especially with the holiday season that we're gonna be heading into here. And so I started listening to it. Now I'm still in the beginning, third of the book. So just so you know, but this idea of the stress cycle and needing to complete the stress cycle just seems to make so much sense. And so basically, the book's by Emily and Amelia Nagaski, and what they talk about is that, and they're talking about from a woman's perspective, and I like what they said. They're like, there's human beings and then there's human givers, and as women, most of us end up being human givers. Other people, like our kids and maybe even our spouses, get to exist, and then here we are needing to give right? Now they give too, don't get me wrong, but I think it kind of resonates with us a little bit, right? That we are human givers, right? But they also said even biologically as women, we deal with stress a little bit differently. All right, well, I went to edit this video and I realized I accidentally deleted a few clips, including this really important part where I want to define burnout. So I'm in our little barn with the cats and the chickens, but let's talk about what burnout actually is. So there's 3 parts to burnout. It's emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and decreased sense of accomplishment. So what those mean: number 1, emotional exhaustion. It's the fatigue that comes from carrying too much for too long. And they said that as women, this is the one that usually gets to us the most, is this emotional exhaustion. Then there's depersonalization, the depletion of empathy, caring, and compassion. And I think many of us can resonate with that, where it's like, I should care about this, but I have nothing to give. I do not care. And then I usually feel guilty about not caring too. And then number 3, the decreased sense of accomplishment, an unconquerable sense of futility or feeling that nothing you do makes any kind of difference. I imagine most of us can relate to that as well. And how in the book, how they define exhaustion is they say exhaustion happens when we get stuck in an emotion. And emotions are like tunnels. They're meant to be gone through. So they say emotions have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's like a tunnel. You're meant to travel all the way through the emotion. But the exhaustion is when we get stuck in the middle. We're stuck in the middle of that tunnel. And so then we're stuck continuing to feel these same feelings because we didn't make it all the way through. And today's video is sponsored by Blinkist. I have to tell you about this really cool new feature with Blinkist. But first, the book we've been talking about, Burnout, you can find it on Blinkist. And what they do is they take over 5,000 nonfiction books and podcasts, and they boil the whole book down to blinks, or the key main ideas of the book. And then you can read them or listen to them in about 15 minutes. And so you're getting all of the best ideas of the book in really bite-sized, manageable pieces. And these books that we're talking about, I mean, they can change your life. They can help you do better at work, in your personal life, any goals that you've been wanting to achieve. The tips and the tools are inside these books, right? But often we don't have time to read the whole book. And so that's why we use Blinkist. It is such a powerful tool. And something else that's brand new and so neat with Blinkist is Blinkist Connect. And so you can connect your premium account with another person's, and then you can share books back and forth. You can discuss the books. And isn't it so cool when we take these new ideas that we're learning and we talk about them with someone else? I mean, that's when they really start to make sense and become something that we can apply to our own life. So you can click on the link down below or use this handy QR code, and you're going to get to try out Blinkist for 7 days completely free, and then also save 25% off that premium membership that you also get to share with someone else. It's like 2 for 1. Isn't that an awesome deal? And then they also go on to define wellness, because we think that's our goal, right? Okay, I don't want to get stuck. I don't want to be burned out. So I need to be well. But they say wellness is a state of action. Basically getting through the tunnel. That's what it means to be well. And so I thought this was actually really helpful to this idea of thinking about it as going through a tunnel. And that's what they're talking about. Then we need to complete the stress cycle. So let's talk a little bit more now about this stress cycle and what it actually means to complete the stress cycle, because it doesn't mean we have to say no to everything. We have to completely clear out our calendar, that we can't have any stressors anymore. It really just means we need to learn how to complete the stress cycle, knowing that the stressors won't go away, but we can deal with the stress in our life. So what's kind of cool is, like, I'm pulling out all these strawberries and everything, but because we did have fabric down, landscape fabric and mulch, they're actually coming out pretty easy. Some of them have been there longer than others, so they're a little more rooted through the fabric, but most of them are coming out pretty easy. And so this garden has been here for 5 years. So I'm actually impressed, especially through our Minnesota winters, how well the fabric has held up. And that really the mulch is starting to break down, but that would be, I think, to be expected after 5 years. So I am gonna put down another layer though of fabric just to make it a little bit harder for plants to grow through, and then we'll put down some fresh mulch as well. So what they propose, this idea of the stress cycle, is that when a stressor comes along, there's all these different biological responses that happen, like sugars dumped into our bloodstream, there's different hormones released, some systems shut down, others come alive, and they call it, they're like, your body is filled with stress juice, is basically what they call it. And so they said in, prehistoric times, we were prepared for fight or flight. We are either going to attack the lion or we are going to run away from the lion, right? But either way, we're gonna have the energy in our body, like all systems go for that physical exertion. Okay, Corbin has the leaves. So, buddy, we're gonna put them around these strawberries here, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. They did a good job. They piled up a bunch of leaves and then they jumped on them a bunch to mulch them up for the strawberries. So they did a very good job crunching them up and then bringing them over in their wagon to put those on. So that's good. So they didn't quite do the whole bed, but it's fine. It is what it is. Some of the bed is better than none of it, I suppose. And I think all of us have heard this, we know this a little bit, but what they said is the problem is for most of us, our stressors, like our job or our kids or, a difficult thing at our kids' school, any number of things, we all have them. But our stressors, they're not generally the type where then we have to flee or fight. And so what happens is we go home at the end of the day and we still have all these stress responses and stress juices in our body, and they're never let out. They're never used. We never complete the stress cycle. And what happens then is that we stay in that state of feeling stressed and kind of amped up. And as I'm listening to this, I'm like, well, that makes perfect sense. And so then from there, though, they go on, and there's like 7 different ways that we can relieve stress. I can share those in just a minute. Darn it, I'm really bummed because I thought this fabric would be wide enough, and it's like 2 or 3 inches too narrow. So I'm gonna put it closest to the strawberry side because this is what overgrows the most, and then I haven't decided yet what we're gonna do on this side. If I'll cut like a strip or something, that just seems like that won't be a good idea. So it is what it is for now. And these little stakes, we haven't gotten rain for a really long time, and so they are so hard to push into the ground. So I don't know, I'm gonna try and step on it, see if it bends or if I can get it pushed in. But we'll get this stake down, and then we'll put some mulch on, and it's gonna look really good. And so what's been interesting to me is that as I'm gonna tie this into minimalism, right? Like, as we've simplified our house, I feel like I have been much more aware of how I'm feeling when stress happens. So I've said this before, but when we were selling real estate is actually a very stressful profession. I'm not sure what the general perception is. I think a lot of it's like, oh, you just unlock doors and whatever. At least when I was selling real estate, it was stressful. And I can still remember I'd be at my computer and like a stressful email would come in, like, oh, they can't close on time, or something came up in the inspection and the whole deal is gonna fall apart. And I remember that I would just walk to the kitchen and look for something like high carb or sugary to eat. And once I became aware of that, I was like, oh my goodness, but my body was trying to prepare for fight or flight, right? And so I had started to train myself that when that happens, then you need to go outside and go for a walk. And it was amazing to me how I would actually feel better after I went for a walk, right? And so I feel like as we've simplified our house, I've been able to like notice these patterns and be like, oh yeah, like that's like stress is happening, something needs to go on to relieve it, or it's very hard to just continue on with the rest of my day. So not all that to say, like, am I perfect at this? No, but I do feel like simplifying my house has made it so that I can even entertain these ideas, right? That I can listen to a book like this and be like, okay, I think I can apply this to my life. And then there was also this bed of tomatoes that hadn't finished getting cleaned out. These tomatoes, I had showed them at the beginning of the season. They looked pathetic when I got them, but we didn't plant them till July. It was the friend of my grandpa had brought them for us. They just looked so pathetic. I didn't know if they were going to do anything, but I fertilized them and watered them, and they went wild, but the majority of the tomatoes never matured by the end of the summer. They were still green. So that's why there was a bunch of tomatoes still in the garden there, which was kind of a bummer. I know there's things you can do with like green tomatoes, but mostly we were throwing them over to the chickens and letting them have them. I have to know my limits. Like I canned those tomatoes, I made tomato soup and everything. But beyond that, I was like, I'm not going to do anything else with it. So I let them be. We probably could have worked them back into the soil too, I imagine. So I had been learning quite a bit more about no-till now. Thank you for all of you who mentioned that. It's so fascinating. And so I do want to work in the rest of our beds here next spring to do no-till. And so that bed though, I just didn't know. I felt like what? There's mulch in it, there's some landscape fabric, and so like we won't actually till them in because we're not gonna till now. And so I was just like, I'm just gonna clean them out for now and then figure out next spring what it is we're gonna do there. So I'm sure many of you are thinking like, you could leave those on, those are good nutrients for the soil, but I just didn't know what to do. So we cleared them out. In the past, when my house was a mess and everything just felt chaotic, to then be like, okay, the stress cycle was triggered and now you need to do something this evening to be able to complete this cycle. I've been like, who has time for that or bandwidth, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to complete the stress cycle by eating some candy and going on Instagram, right? Like that's how I'll complete the stress cycle. It'll be fine. And then I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll do it all over again, right? But now it's to the point where if I don't go on a walk on a given day, I'm just like, something is off. Like it's to the point now where I crave the walk. So as I've been learning about this, I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. It's helping to complete the stress cycle. Okay, here Maggie's feeding the chickens, whatever random stuff she can find. Here is my gardening question for the day. what do you use for weed control? I mean, mulch, weed barrier, like fabric and stuff. But is there anything like that we could spray in the aisles that is natural, not gonna like put bad stuff into the groundwater or whatever? I've tried like the salt and vinegar or stuff with not a lot of success. Do you have any kind of either thing we could just buy or something that's easy to mix up that works well? If you would let me know that, I would be so grateful. But back to the 7 different ways that you can complete the stress cycle, because I know some people are like, well, that's great that you can go for a walk every day, but not all of us can do that, right? And so there are other ways that it can be completed as well. And there might be days where you're like, I don't want to exert physical energy, so what else can I do instead? So another one is to talk with a friend or someone that's understanding. You can do deep breathing exercises, laughter. Our friend Jim Otremba, who's a family therapist, he'd say like there's nothing like a good belly laugh for the soul. And so he was a big promoter of laughing. Affection, so a 20-second hug with someone who is safe and that you want to hug for 20 seconds. Crying, that can be a way to let it all out too. Or creative expression like artwork or creative writing or something like that. So there are other ways too. And you're not getting anger or aggression out, you're literally processing these extra energies like this sugar and stuff that gets flooded into your system and the other hormones and the stress juices, again, as she calls them. So again, I'm not trying to be like, well, I've got it all figured out, so let me tell you. I'm just saying, I think this might resonate with many of us. And if you feel like, wow, I just feel like I'm stuck in that stress all the time, maybe this could be helpful for you as well. It was good too that they clarified the difference between stressor and stress. So the stressors likely aren't going to change immediately or on any given day. Like we get home and we had a stressful day at work, our boss or the jerky coworker is still going to be there again the next day, right? But we still need to process the stress. And so I think it's good to look at them as 2 different things. Like long term for my health, I might need to deal with the stressor, right? Some things we can have control over and some we can't. But if I'm just looking at on a daily basis, like, okay, how did I get amped up today? Like what stress do I need to deal with? And again, kind of going back to simplifying our house, I've talked about it this way, but before too, that's something that I can control, right? Like I can control the inventory in my house. I can control whether or not when I walk in at the end of the day, it feels restful and peaceful because it's pretty tidy and there's just not a lot of stuff everywhere, or if it also feels stressful and I'm not actually getting a reprieve from my day or from the world. And so knowing that there are things we can control, like our environment and our house and decluttering it, and then there's just all those other things that we can't control, right? And so controlling the things we can control, isn't that part of like the serenity prayer, right? Controlling the things we can control, not trying to control the other things and knowing the difference, right, between them. So I am really grateful that we have done the work to simplify our house, because then on a beautiful November day, I can be out in the garden and there's no guilt. I can go for walks most days and fit it into our schedule. And I don't have that extra time tied up in our house. So there's another campaign promotion for minimalism, right? So. And I meant to mention too, the body doubling. I mentioned that at the beginning of the video. So we had talked about this, I don't know, a couple months ago, but all it means is working alongside someone else. And so what's cool about it, 2 things. You can do it virtually. I know many of you have said like, well, that's great, but I don't have anyone locally to body double with. You can do it virtually over a video, like this counts. And you don't have to be doing the same thing as the person. So even though today I'm gardening and, transplanting strawberries, you could be decluttering or doing some household paperwork or doing dishes. We don't even have to be doing the same thing. It's literally just working alongside someone else. And apparently you can go online and hire people to body double with, but hey, you don't even have to hire anyone. Like, I will gladly do this with you all the time. So you motivate me as well. So I am very grateful for that. I don't know. I would really love to know any thoughts that you have on this. I was also thinking as I was working out here, because I had to decide, I'm like, okay, am I going to tackle that today or not? Will we really have enough time to get it all done? And I thought, like, the thought came through my head, like, Dawn, your future self, like next spring self, will appreciate this. And I don't normally think like that. You know, you hear that, like, your future self will thank you. And that's never actually been something that motivates me. I don't know why. Like, you know, people say, make your lunch the night before, your morning self will thank you or whatever. And I'm like, meh, I'll just make it in the morning. Like, it's fine. But we did mention a little while back that we are going to host my cousin's wedding here towards the end of next summer. So I was thinking about, like, okay, well, this could all stay here till next spring. Like, it really could. It's not going to hurt anything. But probably myself next spring will really appreciate if this part is already done, because we'll have a lot of other stuff to do to get ready for the wedding. So yeah, my future self would probably really thank me a lot if I take the time to do this today. So again, I never want to sound like, oh, well, I have it all together and that's why I'm telling you this. I really thought that it was helpful to learn and to know, and it just makes so much of what we experience make sense. And I would say that one way that I prevent burnout in my own life, well, like I talk about, I think I do try to complete the stress cycle by walking and gardening whenever possible. But I think something else that has been helpful is the ability to learn, when am I bringing extra stress on myself? And so there's these outside stressors that we can't control, but then there's the stress I put on myself saying, oh, I should do this, I should do that, I should do this. And we talked about in our 5 days to an organized Christmas, we talked a lot about replacing the word should with could. I could do this and I could do that. And so each day I'm always trying to look at what absolutely has to be done today, what has to be done, and what other stuff just needs to be backburnered right now. I mean, even today, there was a lot of other things I could have done besides work in the garden, right? Our devotional is just about ready to come out, and we're working on our bundt cake recipe book. Like, so many good things going on, but so many details, and my brain does not do detail as well. So many details and just things that go along with it. And so there's so many other things that I could have been doing today, but like I said, I knew it was one of our last beautiful days, and I also knew I just needed some time in the garden today too. All right, I really should get back in the house, but this sunset is so cool. So thought I would share that with you for a minute. Man, I just love it out here when the weather's nice. Oh, what a gift. It's fun to look back and see all the work that we got done today. And isn't it amazing what a difference some new landscape fabric and mulch can make? Like I said, this was about 5 years old, and so I've been really pleased with how it's held up. But I think having another layer down and some fresh mulch will make a big difference as well. And so, and like I said, I do think my future self this spring will be so glad that it's done when we're trying to get our house ready to have a wedding later next year. So it did feel good to get all of that done. But I'd love to know what you're up to this weekend. Anything fun going on? How do you complete the stress cycle? Like I said, there's like that list of like 7. So I'd love to know too, have you noticed, are there certain ways that you prefer to complete the stress cycle? Or is this something new that you're like, oh, maybe I should think about something like that? Again, I never want to add to anyone's to-do list or say, you should do this, or add any guilt or anything like that. So if you're like, that's great information, there isn't really anything I can do with it right now, I totally respect that as well. So you can just save it for another day too. All right, well, I love you. I hope you have a really good weekend, and I'll see you again soon.